And the subject of this presentation is psychopedagogic intervention according to Piagetian theory in girls with Turner syndrome and performance improvement revealed by Bender test. Starting point to a present contribution of a guide with practical activities for cognitive stimulation of Turner girls, teenagers, and women. Next, please. So here we are, authors of this study. Next, please. Next slide, please.
Update the presentation. We are having a wrong back here. Just a minute, please.
No problem. Thank you very much, Andre. I appreciate very much my brother Andre helping me showing the slides.
So your brother Shalvari will help you with your presentation.
Mhm.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
I'm coming back.
Thank you.
Okay for you?
Thank you, Darren. Yes, next, yes, thank you. Turner syndrome is the consequence of total or partial absence of one X chromosome. Next, please, sorry. See, most Turner syndrome carriers present a global normal intelligence, with exception, example given of X ring, although they may show difficulties, for example, in mathematics, attention, and motor coordination. Next, please. Besides, they may show a specific cognitive profile of reduction in visual spatial skills that seems to have been firstly described by Schaefer 1962. Although its exact nature, consistency, and extension are still not completely understood. Next, please. Rawls and co-authors described that the neurocognitive profile observed in Turner syndrome carriers would be associated to a haploinsufficiency for gene or genes on the distal portion of the short arm of the X chromosome. Next, please. And what have we asserted related to this? Next, please. In order to investigate Turner syndrome psychogenetics, Piaget's tests or Piagetian scales and the Bender visual motor Gestalt test were administered to 28 subjects with 45X Turner syndrome and their respective typically developing controls matched for age, race, and socioeconomic status. Next, please. So, the main results we have for this investigation of ours published on 2010 are that on the left you see for Bender test BT results, mainly the total and BLR brain lesion indicators for the Bender test results, confirming the visual motor cognitive deficit in Turner syndrome subjects compared to controls. On the other hand, practically all the results for their performance, the comparison between Turner syndrome and controls performances on Piaget scale had non-significant results for statistical analysis through Mann-Whitney, non-parametric, and exact Fisher tests, thus strongly suggesting a cognitive compensation. Next, please. Of visual motor test confirming a previous study. Hence, our 2010 results suggested the use with TIS carrier Turner syndrome carriers of psychopedagogical intervention through the environmental solicitation process, which is based on educational principles consistent with Piagetian theory as an alternative for this optimization of the process of cognitive compensation that these girls and young women are likely to perform, which was developed in later research. Next, please. When 3 pairs of age-matched 45 girls were evaluated at 2 moments, pre and post test for the Bender test and specific Piaget test or Piaget scales. In between pre and post tests, the experimental intervention through the environmental solicitation process was applied for 1 year to each pair girl with learning disabilities. Next, please. So on their Bender test performance, experimental subjects revealed more ability to planning and organizing their graphic expression in the post-test, as well as presented a decrease in number of brain lesion indicators. Experimental subjects also showed performance improvement in half of the Piaget scale. So, next, please. Here, about the Bender performance test, comparing experimental subject 2 and control subject 2 performances. We would like to highlight, yes, the total score, yes. Thank you very much. For Bender test, yes, in blue for the evaluation and in red for the reevaluation. Just knowing that for Bender test, the lower the score, the better the performance. So we see better performance comparing evaluation and reevaluation. Slightly, yes, better performance for, oh my God, we have, no, they are exchanged. These are for experimental subject 1 and control subject 1. I'm sorry. So that's all right. Let's keep this slide now. This is a comparison between experimental subject 1 and control subject 1. So you see on the left that, yes, here, the experimental subject 1 slightly, yes, better comparing evaluation and reevaluation. While on the right, that is, sorry, control subject 1. Practically no difference, yes, no improvement in control subject 1 performance on Bender test. Next, please. Yes, and oh, no. Let's, yeah, that's enough. Thank you very much. For experimental subject 3 and control subject 3, now here we have on the left, here a greater improvement on experimental subject 3 yeah, on her Bender test performance, comparing evaluation and reevaluation, compared on the right to control subject 3, the evaluation and reevaluation on the right. Yes, thank you. Next, please. Okay, and we have highlighted, okay, the Bender test improvement in experimental subject performances on the previous graph, as we say on the title of our work, that Bender testing performance of our subjects would reveal the, I'm sorry, would reveal their performance improvement after our solicitation, environmental solicitation process in our intervention. But for this figure now, okay, about the Piagetian scales, the comparison between experimental subject and control subject performance, we say that although at least 2 control subjects presented greater improvement on also 2 Piagetian tasks, on the other hand, 1 or 2 experimental subjects showed greater improvement on 3 different Piagetian scales compared to their respective controls. Okay, so next, please. So our data suggested that the intervention instruments may have contributed to the performance improvement of the experimental Turner syndrome girls. Of course, further research is necessary in order to confirm our data. Next, please. So our study described in the 2019 article was a starting point to a, next, please, a guide with practical activities for cognitive stimulation of Turner girls, teenagers, and women. And I would like now to invite the present distinguished audience to share the following guide among your colleagues of expertise and also with Turner syndrome patients besides their respective families. Although simple, all these we believe it's suggested activities and recommendations are effective. And we are convinced that after more than 30 years of experience in this subject, they may help Turner girls, teenagers, and women in optimization of the cognitive compensation, which most of them seem to achieve. Next, please. So, for example, for parents or guardians to perform with Turner girls or teenagers in order to increase the number of dendrites, we suggest simple naming of figures or images, word games. Next, please. Asking the meaning of words, making drawings corresponding to words is example of some activities in order to increase the number of dendrites in brain cells. Next, please. For the development of spatial relations, we suggest wooden building blocks, puzzles, geometrical figures fitting. Next, please. In order to stimulate the construction of logical structures, we suggest, for example, memory games, Scala, iGrid Lock for iPads, Guess Who game. Next, please. Peg Solitaire, Solo Noble, put and take dice, make 10. Next, please. In order to stimulate the construction. Yeah. In order to stimulate causal relationship establishment, we suggest pickup sticks, bowling, balance, ice cubes, show back, and paper tower or team building game. Next, please. In order to provide on-body knowledge and mastery song with gestures, clay doll followed by its drawing. Next, please. And for Turner girls and women themselves, in order to improve their performance in school, university, daily routine activities by increasing their own processing speed, we must now first say that many of the following suggestions were partly extracted and adapted from Turner Syndrome Support Society, TSSS United Kingdom, and we thank for their kind authorization through TSSS Executive Officer and President of Turner Syndrome International Group, Mrs. Arlene Smith. And so we suggest them to practice a specific skill, try to cut down the time it takes to do a homework assignment, make a list of what is required, and checking all the materials needed, cross out each completed step. Next, please. Work on planning and organization skills, break assignments and homework into chunks. Try not to be overwhelmed by the amount of information presented on revision tasks, and so they can avoid aggravating anxiety levels. And as for pre-printed notes, they can pre-read, but to take their own notes. Next, please. And to, in order to increase their own processing speed, consider using a keyboard rather than writing. On the other hand, practice handwriting, and some research has even shown that handwriting helps to memorize and process content, and make reading a priority if it is assigned before a class, as well as review class notes every night, as even a quick glance will help. Next, please. Cover all questions, but one at a time. Use stick notes and highlighters. Use mind mapping for note taking. Next, please. Use technology plus keyboard for note taking and mind mapping. Try brain training apps. Be aware of the emotional factors involved, so it can all feel too much, and this is when they need to stop and ask for help. Next, please. Other useful recommendations for parents or guardians in order to develop attention and calmness: provide clear and consistent routines, keep rules clear and simple, and give reminders calmly. Get physically close, making sure they had the child's full attention when they talk. Next, please. Give instructions one or two at a time, supervise closely, try to ignore irritating behaviors, make time for fun and relaxing things. Next, please. Finally, provide the child a place to study without any distraction. Make it clear all the time that they are observing what the child tries to do, her effort, even when she does not do well. And retain good communication, of course, with doctors and teachers. Next, please. We conclude that most Turner girls, teenagers, and women seem to compensate their spatial difficulties, presenting a cognitive and social adapted behavior. Next, please. On the other hand, they really may present cognitive and psychosocial difficulties. Therefore, they need appropriate orientation and treatment. So, information, guidance, and psychological and psychopedagogical intervention are increasingly necessary, emphasizing the use of guidelines with multidisciplinary approach in order to obtain a better life quality. Next, please. Here are the cited references of this presentation. Next, please. Next, please. And we remain entirely at your disposal. Next, please. For any further clarification about our work, mainly through my email address, fatimacardi@gmail.com. Next, please. I would like to thank Dr. Pedro Henrique Saldanha Memoriam. I am sorry I will not be able to say all that I think. These are all very important people, doctors that have always helped me. Next, please. Well, please read it. I thank Turner girls, teenagers, and women for existing and their families. Next, please. I thank Amelia Hartley for her attention, recognition, appreciation of her work. The generosity and broad-minded approach and all the second international webinar on gynecology organization team. Then comes the worst. Next, please. Oh, my family. Andre, thank you very much. My brother is here helping with this presentation and our computer support. And finally, next, please. Thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Fatima, for your wonderful presentation. Thanks for sharing your valuable research work in this forum.